The Struzina family has a long-running obsession with Scooby-Doo. Debuting in 1969, my parents grew up on the original, Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? In the 90s, I was completely bewitched with Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost. My middle brother loved What's New Scooby-Doo in the 2010s, and my youngest brother, now 17, still watches Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. We own all the DVDs of all of the series, as well as family favorites such as Scooby-Doo and the Ghouls School. Even though we are all very much grown up now, we will still gather around the TV for a Scooby session. My youngest brother loves Scooby-Doo so much, he pleaded with my parents for years for a Great Dane of his own. In 2017, we adopted Coco, our Merle Great Dane. Interestingly enough, in the Middle Ages, Great Danes were seen to possess magical powers. Their size, strength, and loyalty were believed to ward off ghosts and evil spirits. Hence why Scooby-Doo is a Dane, and not a Labrador. Scooby-Doo is truly timeless, ageless, and a comfort show that many people of all ages continue to come back to. And I believe that there are more reasons for this beyond just the nostalgia and connection to childhood. Scooby-Doo and the gang are a group of friends who all represent different archetypal characters. You have the lovable, loyal, comical titular character. You have Fred, the de facto leader. Daphne, the fashion-forward, resourceful, sometimes damsel in distress. Velma, the brains of the outfit. And of course, Shaggy, our fun-loving, always hungry, scaredy cat hippie. A character for everyone. Each one of these characters have their own strengths and weaknesses. And it's as a group that they succeed. Each mystery is relatively simple, consumable, and have clear, neat endings. You always find out who done it. And some of the time, it's not who you expected. The monsters, the ghosts, and ghouls are scary, but not outright harmful or dangerous, and typically are not even supernatural. And the meddling kids always prevail. Unlike other children's shows that are moral heavy, Scooby-Doo subtly teaches lessons like teamwork, critical thinking, friendship, determination, resilience, and most importantly, bravery. The real reason I think that we continue to come back to Scooby-Doo and the gang is community. Best friends, traveling the world, solving mysteries, eating pizza, and having a space where being unapologetically yourself is not only celebrated, but also integral to the group as a whole. It's not about the monsters, the fear, or even the resolutions. It's about the friendship. Something you don't know about me is I am really into etymology, the study of the origin of words. I don't just like to look up definitions, but rather dive into the word's history, the purpose, and its necessity. A word that is gathering more and more meaning for me recently is patron. A patron is a person who supports the things they love with endorsements, encouragement, and money. Historically, patrons of the arts would be wealthy or influential people who aided artists in their craft by bestowing them with the materials or financial backing they needed to create their works. Every time that you turn on the West London Witch, you're being a patron. Every time you share a social media post about the podcast or tell a friend about us, you're being a patron. Every time you like, comment, or subscribe to our YouTube channel, that is an act of a patron. That support, love, and endorsement does wonders for our show and continues to grow our audience. However, if you really like the work that Danny and I do and think it's worth a couple of bucks, I would be honored for you to join us on our Patreon page. Every dime that comes into our Patreon goes directly back into the show that you are listening to today. It doesn't have to be much. For as little as $1, £1, €1 a month, you can not only unlock our entire Patreon catalog, but you can also feel good about supporting two creatives who are passionate about sharing their craft with the world. If this sounds like something you'd like or are able to do, head on over to patreon.com/The West London Witch and come and join us in our little coven. Hello and welcome to episode 90 of The West London Witch, a podcast where we share stories about those moments where we find ourselves very much not alone. Everybody loves when paranormal investigators come onto the show to share their most spine-chilling moments from investigations. And today, current and former investigators from the Vancouver Paranormal Society have come to share with us not only their favorite boo moments, but also what got them into this work to begin with. Today, Matt, Mike, and Leah will share a collection of tales with us. And I have a sneaky suspicion that while listening to them, you may hear an origin story that resonates with you. I'm Rebecca Strazina, and this is The West London Witch, Episode 90, Vancouver Paranormal Society.
Let's see, in approximately, I guess it was 2001, myself and my young family bought and moved into an older farmhouse in Surrey. And Surrey is a suburb of Vancouver. So we're not talking the Surrey that's in the UK. And so on this property, it was quite a large acreage. And on this property was the main building that we lived in. And then there was a building out back, which was also, as we found out afterwards, a church that had been used for a cult, a Christian-based cult.
Matt and his family had purchased the property with the intention to modify and refurbish the church building into a living quarters that their family could stay in. A separate space that would be comfortable for the in-laws during long, extended visits.
I mean, the building itself was quite old, the main building, built in about the 1960s or so. And by the time we bought it, it was in need of a lot of work. So we started going through and renovating almost every single room in the house. Over the next couple of years before we sold the place, everyone in the family experienced some weird things. I myself, for instance, was sitting in the dining room area. I can't remember what I was doing, but I was just sitting there, minding my own business. And then directly behind me, the door to the kitchen is closed. It's about 3 feet away. And it was one of those hollow skin doors that were quite popular around the 60s and 70s. So right next to me, I heard this gigantic knock. And so I turned around thinking it was my wife who was playing a joke on me. And right away, I opened the door. And nothing there. So I called out to my wife, who was on the other side of the main floor, and I said, "Did you hear that?" And she calls out and she says, "Yeah, I heard that. Was that you?" And I said, "No, it wasn't me." So then she came, and it took her a few moments to come over from where she was. There's no possible way she could have been playing a joke on me. That was the first thing that I remember. And that happened a couple of times as well.
Matt and his wife may have been able to shake off this experience, but it wasn't an isolated one. More and more unexplainable activity began to occur in the home.
Walking around the house, as I'd walk through the living room, for instance, things would just randomly fall off the shelf. Things which appeared to be, well seated up on the shelves, and there's no reason why they would be falling off, but they'd just randomly fall off as I walked by. My daughter, who had a loft bed, she had a dresser which was right next to her bed, and would look down in the middle of the night and actually see items moving off and then falling off the edge of her dresser. So that's one thing that she witnessed. My younger daughter, who was must have been about 6 months old by the time we first moved in, and then had began to speak, a little bit later, of course. When she became verbal, she used to point to the door, and she'd say things like, no, you get out, this is our house. When we asked her who she was talking to, she said she was talking to the other grandma. And so not my mother-in-law, but the other grandma.
Needless to say, these experiences were uncomfortable and disturbing. Matt began to reach out to the neighbors to ask them what they might know about the property and the former residents.
The previous owner of the house his wife had started to suffer from Alzheimer's. The way he handled that was to put locks in every room, and eventually ended up, because I guess he wasn't maybe capable of dealing with it, but he ended up locking her in a number of rooms so that she wouldn't wander the neighborhood and get lost. Can't say it for sure, but we think that maybe this was the other grandma that we're referring to here. On another instance, my older daughter, who was out bouncing on the trampoline in the backyard, she looked over and she saw this elderly male walk along the pathway and go into the church area, and she thought, I don't know who this is. I'm going to go find out. So she followed in the front door, and there she met my father-in-law. And she said, "Grandpa, who is that man?" And he said, "What man? No man came in here. I don't know any man."
Confused, Matt's daughter asked her grandfather once more. "No, Grandpa, I saw an old man walk in. Who was it?" Yet, equally confused, Matt's father-in-law had to once again tell his grandchild that there was no one there.
On another occasion, my wife, who was sitting in the backyard, just enjoying some downtime at one point. One thing you need to realize is the back third of the property was wooded, and so where she was, she could actually see into the wooded area, and she noticed shadow figures wandering back and forth within the wooded area. So she didn't go any closer to investigate, but I think that was enough for her for that day, and she ended up going back inside.
So, what kind of church was this? Well, it wasn't exactly your local branch of the Baptist or Lutheran persuasion. This church had more esoteric beliefs.
Well, the building out back, one thing we noticed, we had known from talking to the person that sold it to us. Actually, it was his son, I should say, who was settling the estate and selling the house. He had mentioned that it had been a church, and we thought, well, okay, that's no big deal. But then there was a what would you call it? I guess a screen that they would pull down that had this passage that had been, modified from the Bible. It sounded really, really odd. So it wasn't clearly based on a biblical passage, but they had modified it somewhat. So, and I can't remember exactly what it says now, but that was the first clue that maybe it wasn't quite sort of a mainstream gathering. Every once in a while, though, when we were doing renovations, I'd open up an old cupboard or something, and I'd find a book on astral projection or clairvoyance or witchcraft and stuff like that. So it's quite clear that they were into some of that sort of stuff. And then we'd receive letters from people all over the place, from the Netherlands, from all over Europe, offering to do things like channel the dead for us, and that sort of thing. And then we talked to the neighbor as well. And we went shortly after we bought the place. We went next door and introduced ourselves. And they said, "Oh, you bought the place. I don't know if you know it or not, but about 3 weeks before you moved in, there was a whole bunch of people in gowns and doing a progression all the way through the back of your property there." Well, no, we certainly weren't aware of that. So that's how we clued in to the fact it wasn't quite a mainstream church, let's say.
Matt doesn't think that this religious group was doing anything illegal, untoward, or destructive, but rather that they may have been dabbling in something greater than just Bible study.
Yeah, I think it was, I think they were Christian based, but they had a very open mind in terms of how they communicated with those that had passed on beforehand. I got the impression certainly that they were trying to channel and to communicate with those who passed on. And that might not have been the wider congregation, but I think it might have been a smaller group of the previous owner, his wife, and probably a smaller group of friends there.
After 4 years on the property, Matt sold the house, the church, and the surrounding land and ended his journey with the property.
We sold the property, and because it was a large piece of property, a developer came in and put up 4 or 5 houses or however many. Now, I don't know if the current owners experience anything. I'm not sure I want to knock on the door and say, hey, we were the previous owners. Have you experienced anything? Because, I think that, there's an ethical issue there. I don't want to plant in their mind that, oh, by the way, you've just built on haunted property. So I don't want to make that suggestion. I don't want that to impact them. So I don't know. I don't know if it's continued.
Although that concluded Matt's chapter in the home, it began a new one for him. The things his family had experienced on that land was so bizarre, unexplainable, and otherworldly. It made him question, what else is out there? I'd now like to introduce you to Mike. Much like Matt, Mike's interest in the paranormal was sparked by a series of unexplainable phenomenon. He's the skeptic of the team and had always had a fascination with the spooky and unexplained, but he wasn't totally convinced. However, after his wife's passing, Mike experienced 2 events that rocked his paradigm.
And a week after she passed, 2 things happened that really made me, okay, maybe there's something to this. She had a fascination for dying. And about 3 days after she passed, I'm in the kitchen making supper or whatever, and I hear a coin rolling in the living room. And I go out to have a look, and right in the center of the floor in the living room is a dime. So I go, okay, maybe it fell from somewhere or, whatever. Then she also had a fascination for feathers. She'd always out for a walk, pick up feathers and that kind of thing. And she also always, I don't want to say nagged me to eat healthy. So this was about maybe 4 days after that dime incident. I was in a rush. I was busy all day and in a rush. Didn't feel like cooking supper, so I just stopped at McDonald's, grab a burger and that. And I'm sitting in my TV room, watch TV, eating my Big Mac. And there's these sliding glass doors right across from me. And I'm eating it, starting to feel a little guilty. So I just look up and say, I know, honey, it's not that healthy. I agree. And all of a sudden, a wind picked up outside and blew a feather against the sliding glass door. So that really got me thinking. So I just searched like paranormal research teams on the internet, and VPS came up first, like it was the first one, and contacted them, and here I am.
These two events led Mike to a now lifelong quest of uncovering the unknown. He's been with VPS for years now and has done endless investigations with the team. But there is one investigation that continues to haunt Mike to this very day.
We as a team, we were asked to come give a public presentation at a place that here in BC, we refer to it as the Pink Palace.
The Pink Palace in Surrey, British Columbia, was originally built in 1992 and is actually called the Pacific Inn Resort. It was built with 150 guest rooms, 10,000 square feet of meeting rooms and conference spaces, and has an eye-catching indoor structure that acts as an atrium courtyard. The hotel no longer functions as a guest house, but you may recognize it from the 2020 TV show The Stand, based on the Stephen King novel. The once massive pink hotel has now been painted white and predominantly serves as a filming location, conference space, and has even been opened up for paranormal tours.
But the hotel, for a time, was owned by the Montreal mob, who in turn either stole it or had a notorious biker gang run it. So for a long period of time, there were a lot of questionable stuff happening within this hotel. So we were asked to give a public presentation like 2 days before Halloween. And the way it was worked, there's 4 of us, but we were in different locations, and a group of 6 would come down. We would like do a mini presentation, mini investigation, that kind of thing, and answer questions, that sort of thing. So I was in the basement by myself, and the claims for the basement was the one bathroom, the light would automatically come on. And then in the other bathroom, according to staff, they thought that there was a spirit that was trapped in the bathroom, in the very last stall. So I was outside both bathrooms. First group came down, did my spiel. They left. As I'm sitting there by myself, the light in that first bathroom came on. So I went in and checked. There's no one in there. And the light switch is one of those motion sensor switches. So something had to pass in front of it to turn it on. No, there was no one. I was the only one down.
When the next group headed to the basement, Mike was delighted to find out that one of the guests was an electrician. Mike asked him to take a look at the light, try to debunk the mysterious activity. But the electrician insisted it all looked okay to him. There must have been someone or something passing by to trigger the motion detector.
I start doing my spiel, and one of the guests, they just said, I just heard something in this other bathroom. So I grabbed my voice recorder and I said, you all stay out here. I'm going to go in there and just do a little investigation, see if I can catch anything. So I'm standing just inside the entrance to the bathroom. And do you know, in like public bathrooms, they got those metal walls to separate the stalls? I'm standing beside, I'm not touching it, just standing beside it. And I asked the question, do you want me to leave? And it was just like someone just punched that wall right beside my head. So I took that as an invitation to go in further. And I went into the last stall where they said the spirit was trapped. I have my voice recorder and I'm asking a series of questions, not hearing it, not picking up anything, just Okay, so I finish, come out, finish with that group, send them off.
It was strange, unexplainable. But that was the end of the activity for the night. Or at least, that's what Mike thought.
When I got home later, I'm listening to my voice recorder and to the question of, is there anyone here with me? Clear as a bell on my voice recorder, I see you.
You in here?
And then later on, I asked the question, are you trapped here? Do you need help? And again, clear as day, we see things.
You trapped here?
So, who could have been watching Mike? Who was responsible for those chilling EVPs? Well, there isn't any sound evidence, but Mike has a few theories.
It's kind of well known that while that biker gang was running the place, there were murders, there were tortures, kidnappings, a lot of bad stuff going on. So what is actually trapped in there? Why? We don't know at this point. My first impression, first opinion would be someone who was seeing something very bad happen in there went into that last stall to hide and was either found out, captured, or like something along those lines.
So you think that they witnessed something terrible, went and hid in the last stall, and then maybe the same fate befell them that they had just witnessed?
Yeah. So that still gives me chills. And that was my most fantastic experience.
We are going to finish up our series of boo moments today with Leah. Leah's lifelong questioning of the unknown led her to the Vancouver Paranormal Society and her favorite ghostly encounter.
So for me, my experience with paranormal started as a child. It seems every house that I lived in growing up had some type of activity. Things would happen. When I was younger, my parents would say like, oh, can you go get me this from the basement and remember to shut the door, come upstairs. And I would always do that. And when I would go back down, the doors would be open, things would be moved with no explanation. Things like that happened to me basically all of my childhood into adulthood. And I think once someone experiences something that they can't explain, they either will just shut it out entirely or they'll start looking further to try and explain it, which is exactly what I did.
This hunger for answers led Leah to VPS. Here she found fellowship, like-minded folks with similar interests and questions, the same desire to learn and experience more. For the last 6 years, she has been investigating with the team and has been to dozens of locations. But one stands out above the rest.
The most memorable investigation that I could say I have been on is actually my first investigation ever. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with residential schools, but my very first investigation was at a residential school.
Residential schools are tragic locations. They were a network of government-funded, religiously ran boarding schools that began in the late 1800s. The last fully funded school did not close until 1997. The schools aimed to assimilate Indigenous children into Western European culture. The outcome effectively erased their own heritage, traditions, identities, languages, and spiritual beliefs. Children were often forcibly stolen from their families and were forbidden to speak their own languages or practice their own cultural traditions. They also suffered harsh punishments, terrible living conditions, physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. And some of the children died from mistreatment, disease, and rampant neglect. The trauma connected to these schools will forever haunt Indigenous communities as they grapple with the unimaginable damage created by government-sponsored colonization and cultural genocide.
It is still, I don't want to say the name because it is still a running business that does still deal with the Indigenous population, but it obviously is not a residential school any longer.
Originally, VPS were called out to this location due to the workers in the building being scared and unsettled by mysterious paranormal activity. Workers would hear phantom voices and noises, see figures roaming in the halls, had the horrible sensation of being watched, and worked day in and day out with a constant feeling of dread and fear while being in the building.
It has been reported by everyone that works in the building that there's activity there. So when I first went, the president and I, Kelly, we actually were set up in the gym, just the two of us. And we were sitting on the gym floor. And there had been, I want to say he was a caretaker at the school that used to, walk around the grounds, and he would always whistle when he was working. And I asked if that caretaker was still there, and if he could show me he was there by whistling. So I whistled to show him what I wanted him to do. And immediately, even with my own ears, I heard a whistle. I did capture it on my recorder as well, but it's not often that you will hear something, an EVP, that you also hear with your own ears. I mean, I was shocked. I was like, oh my God, did you guys hear that? Like, am I the only one that heard that? And the whistle sounded so far away. Like it came from outside. It was not in the room with us. But the thing is, these grounds, well, A, it was very late at night, but B, the grounds are closed off, so people can't get to them. So we were the only ones there. I know for a fact there was no one that could have whistled. And so right away off the hop, the investigation is super interesting. As you can imagine, the energy in that building is through the roof.
The investigation was off to a positive start. Soon, Leah and VPS President Kelly left the gym and headed to their next location to investigate.
We continued through our tour. We went to some other buildings that were, I guess they were called outbuildings at the time. What they were used for was the teenage boys that were at the school. So the younger ones, I guess, stayed inside primarily the school itself. The teenage boys were housed in other buildings outside.
The outbuilding was set up like a long hotel hallway, doors on either side of an extended corridor.
So we sort of set up our equipment so that we had a camera facing one end, another camera facing the other end. Then some of us stood in the doorways so that we can kind of see each other. We're held up in the doorway. It was Kelly, myself, and one other investigator. It was also her first investigation as well. All the doors are open except for one in the hallway. And as we're standing there, we start asking questions, the doors start to rattle. Just this one specific door that was closed. It starts to rattle. So, of course, that gets us, excited. And this other investigator that was with us she was in the doorway standing slightly behind me. And as we start asking, who is in the room with us, the door that I was standing in literally slammed shut. And we had to move out of the way or we were going to be shut with the door. That was that specific girl's first and last investigation. But I knew in that moment that this was something I would continue to do forever. I can't explain really what the draw is to it, but trying to connect with people on the other side, it's just something I feel like I was born to do.
VPS is a team of 11 investigators eager to explore the unknown. Their goal is to ethically and respectfully uncover mysteries of the paranormal and help those seeking answers. There are groups like the Vancouver Paranormal Society all over the globe. And if you feel like Matt, Mike, and Leah's origin stories and interests in the paranormal sound like your own, why not research and reach out to a paranormal group near you? Find a team whose values align with your own. Join a group you can grow and learn alongside. And if you're not for going out on investigations, but would like more of a community, why not join the West London Witch Patreon? A space where everyone involved believes and is interested in the mysteries of the unknown, and is longing to learn more about this world and, more importantly, the beyond. If you'd like to check out more of the Vancouver Paranormal Society's work, head on over to their Facebook and Instagram, or the Vancouver Paranormal Society website. Thank you to Matt, Mike, and Leah for sharing your stories with us. I am so glad that the ghosties have brought us all together. Do you have a spooky story you'd like to share? I'd love to hear it. Drop me an email at thewestlondonwitch@gmail.com or find us on Instagram and Facebook at The West London Witch. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. And come and follow us for additional content on Instagram and Facebook. Until next time, merry meet, merry part, and merry meet again. The West London Witch is created by me, Rebecca Strazina. Our sound designer and production magician is the incredible Danny Cross. Our theme music was bespokely written and performed by the wickedly talented Kyle Hall. Our cover art is the beautiful collaboration between Lizzie Wilson and Jake Bowser. Special thanks to Miss Sinead Bowers, our quality control and biggest cheerleader. And thank you to you, all of our listeners all over the world. These are your stories. Thank you for sharing them with us.